the industry and the people on the sponsorship and marketing side has evolved. It's bigger budgets, etc. I don't want to go like all out this year. I just want to build on foundations and I want to build on our name. You may not like the politics, but people love British culture, whether it's music, film, etc. And I was like, I want to be that one that does that for gaming. In the world of esports, people know who we are as Excel, and that is what counts. From a competitive perspective, we want to hold a trophy. But I say my minimum requirement is that we qualify to the stage.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another CoEs Industry podcast. My name is Finnlo. I am a year 2 event student at College of Esports, and I'm joined by the amazing
Wouter Sleijffers.
Indeed.
Hi.
So, do you want to quickly introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you've done, and then we'll get straight into it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Great to be here. My name is Wouter. I am currently a director of my own business, which is called MC3.gg. We'll talk about that. Just didn't happen just like that. I've actually spent 9 years now in the world of esports. I've been a CEO of Fnatic here based in the UK. I've been a CEO to Excel Esports, which is now called Giant Excel. So sort of 4 years on average for both. But I haven't always been in esports. Actually, prior to that, I've worked in fintech and I started off in semiconductors, but I would like to say, there's been a lot of digital involved and a bit on the hardware side. And it all culminates into, in a way, what makes esports. So that's
Exciting.
a bit about me.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully go through your life story and pick out little bits of knowledge here and there and try kind of get whatever we can out of you for people at home interested in going into esports. So thanks for joining us, Wouter. We also, of course, have Stanley here, as always. He's under your care today, if you will.
Nice.
So yeah, take good care of him. He's a favorite in the studio, and for our listeners at home, everyone loves Stanley. So to start us off, you haven't always been in esports, right? Both of us are actually from the Netherlands.
Yep.
So we both have the experience of going from the Netherlands into the UK. You started off at TU Delft, which is a big technical university in the Netherlands.
Yep.
How did you go from that to the UK? What happened there?
So University of Technology in English, Technische Universiteit Delft
Yeah, exactly.
in Dutch.
Yeah.
But I didn't go straight from uni to London. So I started off working in the world of semiconductors, a company called ASML. They're based in the south of the Netherlands. Actually so I have indeed an engineering degree, and then at some stage I was like, because I will talk about it, I think I also have a bit of a creative mind. It's like, the world of technology is amazing and it's really great, but I like to work on ideas, I like to work on concepts. And then I actually thought like marketing in a way is a step before maybe at times what technology is doing, if depending on how you look at it, but coming up with new ideas and also the creative side. So I took a step to learn more about the world of marketing and digital marketing. And so I've also worked actually at a marketing research agency.
Was it still in the Netherlands or was it already? Okay.
Yes, Rotterdam, Netherlands. And
amazing city.
I lived in Amsterdam then.
Okay.
Anyway, so I spent actually quite a few years in the Netherlands and a few other things that I've done, but I'll fast forward to coming to the UK. Simply said, the combination of like just the adventure, but more importantly, a girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
And it was a bit like, okay, Netherlands or UK, and London is a great city. So it's like, okay,
that's what
just want to go there, right? Okay.
That's what happened for me. I had the same kind of feeling of like there's esports degrees in Breda at the time was starting up, but nothing's like traveling to London for university, and it's that sense of adventure, right? That is a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
So what did you do when you came to London?
Prior to I came to London, it was actually after that market research agency, digital market research agency, when we were talking still about e-commerce was e-business, and so that was all early days. I also spent a few years in a financial services firm, actually in car leasing, which is really quite fun because it's money and cars basically. So it ticks two big boxes. And when I came to the UK, actually, so we're talking about quite a few years ago. You see, got some grey hairs already throughout life, but it was 2008. And it was actually financial crisis at that time, the one before this one, sort of. And so there wasn't actually that much available at that time. Neither in London, a big city where there's a lot happening. But I then, through digital marketing, actually got eventually a job opportunity in what they also call here online gaming. But it's not the sort of online gaming that you and I know. It's more like the betting things. But it was poker, online poker. It was a company called Everest Gaming, because I believe they're not really around anymore. But they were actually quite known for their poker product at that time. It was a cool company. I liked it, but it wasn't, my greatest passion, to be honest. You've got to really like the game, whether you play it at a table, real table, an online table, the game is the same, right? So essentially it's not like a ton of innovation happening there. But that's actually the first job I had. And, it's maybe interesting because I had not thought that I would land with this, but I took it on and I liked it and I learned a lot. But I didn't like it as much as like to stay there and, to spend a lot of time there. So I was quite set to continue on that. And then my next step was actually going to fintech. And so that one thing took me to the other thing. And actually, we can talk about that as well. But actually, that one thing brought me eventually to.
Right. And did you have a passion for gaming and like? Did you play games growing up? Is that something you're always interested in, or is that?
Yeah, definitely. And I will always say, and I didn't get into esports because of my gaming skills. I think I have a quite broad interest. I level up. I play times competitive, but I love the creativity. I love the social aspect. I love the fun of the game. I'm competitive. I hate losing. Obviously, that's why.
Don't we all? Yeah.
But you know what? Like it's also at a time. For me, like it was also still quite console driven and so it's kind of at times weird to say because we go quite a while back, but there was nothing like YouTubers where you could watch a lot of the content. So it was a lot like just with your friends and visiting your friends, and they one at one console and another one and so and then
LAN parties.
Essentially,
Exactly.
I didn't know it was LAN party called them, but that was actually it. So that's how it started. But I think my interest was particularly that I liked how fast it's all evolving, and if you look at just those years ago, and in my sort of in the whole world, like still relative short time in the world of gaming, either as a consumer or in the business, so many incredible things have happened. And I think that's also part of, the passion, is just to see how that world has evolved over time. And esports is a big part of that.
Definitely. So. And I mean, you yourself have had a massive impact in those first steps of esports, I'd say, right? Because you joined Fnatic at a very early stage where esports was still small. And how did that happen? How did you get into Fnatic and get into esports?
Yeah, interesting question, because people did ask me sometimes, how did you get at Fnatic?
Exactly, yeah.
And like I said, it's not because I joined the team and I was really good at it. So the story is, so at the end of 2009, I went from this online poker and I was interviewing, and I sort of wanted to move on. I got to a company called Moneybookers, fintech, but Moneybookers became Skrill, and Skrill is all now part of PaySafe, which you may know at times because PaySafe and PaySafe card is at times a payment option in the game that you're playing. So they were also in gaming. They were also, with casinos and stuff, but the point is, and I do remember this very clearly, June 2012, and I was heading the marketing for Skrill at that time, and one of my team members said, like, okay, there's these guys from Fnatic. They want to do an activation with us at Gamescom. So we were exhibiting at Gamescom with a stand, and we've been looking to see how we could do some activation. And so one of my team members was in touch with Fnatic, and they had done some proposals, and then we did a follow-up meeting, and I was there. And then it was Sam Matthews, who was then sort of CEO of Fnatic. He's
current CEO as
one
well,
of the
obviously.
very early ones, and let's say founder of Fnatic. Yes, and current CEO again. So we'll talk about it as well. And Patrick Settman. And Patrick Settman,
better known as Karn, probably for people in CS:GO. Yeah,
very much. Yeah. So. And you know, I always say like that's the only time that I'd seen Karn in a jacket, you know, like a bit more formal. And they started to talk about, so they came to present Fnatic. And again, June 2012, we talk about quite a while back, and so things were different then.
3 years after Fnatic started? Is it 2009 they?
No, well,
2004, isn't it?
The birth date is originally 2004.
It's 20 years this year.
20 years
exactly,
this year.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Fnatic, if you're watching.
Exactly, yeah.
So the early days of Fnatic, and they kind of just showed up at your doorstep? Almost?
Showed up at the doorstep. It was in our office. Back then, you know, skills near Barbican. It's all moved to Canary Wharf and so later. And they presented Fnatic, and you know, they showed a lot of footage, and obviously I know, you know, I knew kind of like the game of Counter-Strike and other games, but I wasn't like watching a lot of the content, so I knew more the game. I didn't really know much about the esports side of it. So that was my first wow moment. It's from, oh my God, is that all of that happening, you know?
This is a part of my world, essentially. Yeah, almost. Yeah, exactly.
And I'll just call out a still good friend. So, you know, Patrick, there was also Saad Sauer, who was on the commercial side. He's also still active in esports. He's actually in the Middle East right now, where he's originally from. And I say that because Saad was actually the first person to say, look, you should come to this event. And this event was here in, I say here, it's actually another part in town, but Wembley Arena. And it was League of Legends. I think it was mid-season event.
MSI.
Yeah,
MSI.
exactly.
Yeah. We had that in London last year, actually. It was in London last year again. So that and back in the day again.
And the World Championship
coming again this year, of course. Yeah,
really
that's
amazing.
exciting.
It sort of feels like, you know, sometimes like
come full circle.
Full circle. I was going to say
exactly,
that. Saad told me you should come to the event, and you know, I was reading about it, and the first thing I read about it was that it was sold out in minutes, right? And I'll tell you, I had no clue what to expect at the time. Just imagine, and we'll talk about, you know, maybe times how to get into esports and things I've experienced in my own journey. And let's say I was quite I don't want to call it clueless, but I didn't know much about what to expect. So I'd never been to an event, hadn't seen much like footage except what, you know, Fnatic showed me at the time. And I was like, I don't know how this goes, you know? Is that like a chess match and then people are just watching or so, you know? And then I got to the event, and as in like I took the tube, I went to Wembley Arena, and I was sort of outside of the arena, and I could hear the sound from inside the arena, you know, outside. And so Wembley Arena is like next to the big Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, so
it's
Wembley
closed.
Box Park, it's called now, I think. Box Park, isn't it?
Yeah,
Pretty
it's
sure
part
it
of
is.
Box Park, but what I mean to say is like it's closed. You know, it's not like an open this bigger stadium. But I found it quite impressive that you could hear the crowds already. And then I went into Wembley Arena, and literally, it's just all these moments I remember so clearly.
Reliving
That's
it
why I
almost, yeah, exactly.
I saw that you need to push open the doors to get to the stadium, and I felt this whoosh, like, so it was like a wind, and then it was obviously a bit of like, you know, but it just made the experience so impressive because there was a crowd, like, you know, on his chairs, basically.
Watching games. Yeah, exactly.
And okay, so that is you know, talking about how I got into esports. That was June, still sort of June, July.
So that's your first interaction almost with esports. That's your first
Yeah.
actually seeing it in person,
Experiencing
experiencing
myself
it. Exactly, yeah.
as a fan to become,
Mhm.
you know. Let's say from that moment I was definitely sold.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't until like late in the year that I was actually moving out of fintech. I had been there for a good 5 years, and I literally had some time at my hands.
Mhm.
Um, and I know one of your questions is about research now, which is on my resume,
Mhm.
because that was still in between
Fintech and esports.
fintech and
It's- Yeah,
esports.
exactly.
And this will just only come as a little bit of career advice or not, you
Mhm.
know, like
Mhm.
no matter how you want to look at it. But uh, I started then. Fnatic started to say, "Oh, actually, we're looking for a CEO
Mhm.
because Sam Matthews started Fnatic at a time. You know, it started 2004. We're now talking end of 2014, so it existed already for 10 years." And I guess my view is that at a time there were some, you know, let's call it OG esports founders or so.
Mhm.
It exists longer than even 2004, but sort of, you know, from the PC gaming side and stuff. And uh, that maybe they expected, like everyone at times expected, oh, in 5 years this is booming, and
Mhm.
you know maybe we're going to sell more business, and then it's 10 years later, and it's still not as big as they
Mhm.
dreamed it to be.
Mhm.
So people start to do other things, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
it's even on the player side. I saw that at that time when online poker was a boom, that some of these online poker players were actually more passionate about, you know, esports, so to speak, than online poker. It's just that at that moment there was more money to be earned there. So you know, Sam was also doing a few other things. He was also part of an agency called Neverblend, and you know, and so obviously Patrick was doing a lot, and Sam's mother as well, and Matthew's been quite pivotal as well to Fnatic. But then they said like, okay, we're actually looking for a CEO.
So it's kind of with the thought of taking the company further into
Yes,
like the
yes.
next.
Because what I was doing, I was essentially volunteering to Fnatic.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not going to say that's always like good career advice, because you have to understand your value and what you can bring. But at that time, you know, I was just exploring a few things, and it was not the only, you know, party where I said, okay, maybe there's a few things I could do. I have a bit of time on my hands, but that's how the conversation started. I
Right.
was like,
Yeah. Exactly. Because you kind of get your first foot in the door, essentially, right? And you provide work that they know you are good at. I mean, it's what we do at College of Esports as well, right? Like our entire broadcast is run by volunteers and people who want to do it with that thought in mind of, hey, if I put in the work here, that'll result in.
Yeah, and exactly, and that also we can talk more about in a bit. But I would say, you know, it wasn't necessarily a foot in the door. I think it was just interest and passion. But you're right. It was in the end, you know, a starting point for a conversation that
Exactly,
didn't
yeah.
start like, oh, let me be CEO. It was actually more like, let me, you know, maybe there's a few things I can do with a bit of my experience. So that resulted like that. And then, you know, it was still quite a new world for me. And, you know, it's a beautiful world, but taking that as a career step, you know, you just have to think a little about that. So, you know, I have two beautiful boys. They're 13 and 12 now. They were big. They were already there around at the time, but much younger. But what I mean to say is, you know, you need to think a bit carefully when you spring into the deep or something
Exactly.
new.
'Cause
And
it's quite a risky industry to get into as well, right?
well, I would say then it was more than it is now.
Definitely, yeah.
But I felt actually very confident about it. And actually not knowing everything about the industry, leave alone, you know, all those games and stuff. But I felt, and I think that was good, that I could bring more the business experience
Yeah,
while
exactly, yeah.
knowing what this is all about.
So how can I imagine it happening? Was it Sam invited you into the office and sat down, here's a contract, CEO, sign here? Or how does that happen?
So the first conversation was, I guess, like August or so, 2014, and I did not officially start until January 2015. So the
Okay.
first thing we did was just more ideating, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was doing I would say I was doing the first step. I would do this. Here's how I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So put things in a presentation, and from here's how I would structure the business,
Mm-hmm.
and here's how I would do this commercially in that maybe the esports side. And I had several conversations with people who were then in Fnatic. So again, Patrick, Saad. There was also a person joining, Chris Hanna, who became later the CEO of the Esports Observer and who's now with Colex. So, conversations. And so that took a few months, a bit like, very much on the ideation level. And two, we would personally connect. And three, also to see if it would work for me. But coming back to research now, I was also interviewing for other jobs because, I didn't know where this would go and, didn't start immediately as a very serious conversation. So I got a position at research now, which is also, the name says, research and marketing research. So, and I took then a little bit the bold position after a bit more talks that I decided to go with Fnatic, and we worked out the proposal and how it would work. It was still a little bit in the deep, certain details we just had to figure out. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump in the water now. Like I've measured the temperature. I know it's going to be like, it's going to be just...
Maybe a tad bit cold, but you might. It's worth it, right? Essentially, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, but I was very confident that I'll be able to swim, and take this further. So, so in my own probation period of research now, I don't know as if that's always nice to say, but I'll be transparent about the choices I made. And so I was actually saying like, okay, actually guys, sorry, but I'm going to do this. And this is Fnatic. And so, I left something maybe a bit more secure for something more exciting for myself.
More passionate almost, right? And that is important. I mean, that's what I get. Like, I get my drive, my passion for broadcasting is what drives you to do work, and it almost feels easier to do your job, right? I mean, they say like making your hobby your job, I guess, right? And I imagine that's probably in your mind when you actually have to choose between going into esports or back into marketing, I guess, and research.
Yeah. I mean, it's different for everyone, right? Like I have also sometimes thought like times listen to career advice, and some people would say like, follow your passion, and so it's like, yeah, but it's not always like this, right? And I would also say like, and that's true, you have plenty of time. So I tell myself as well, still think of yourself at times as a young person because, age doesn't matter that much, I guess. But if you need to know for yourself when you feel still confident enough that you can take risks. I think, risk always need to be sort of balanced.
Calculated, I guess.
Calculated risk. But if you're confident and you can, sort of at times take the time for it, and, it does take time sometimes, then I believe, good things will come.
Go for it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, 4 years at Fnatic-ish. What was that like? What did you run into? What was like let's say your biggest achievement and possibly your biggest problem during that time?
Yeah. So, and I'll do also a little bit that comparison with Excel Esports. And the reason I bring that up right now is that I could see later with Fnatic that Fnatic was already a big name but in a much smaller industry. And that had its challenges, but obviously also great benefits. Excel, at least in the global, scheme of things, it was a very small name, but in a much big industry. So that had its own challenges. Also, I'd like to say, like, I'm obviously not the founder of either. So I think my biggest achievement, and I like these sort of catchy phrases that I came up later, but I took it from bedroom to boardroom. And
so making it more professional.
Yeah.
In some, okay.
Or sometimes they like to say with startups, from 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
I say I didn't do from 0 to 1, but maybe I took it from 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I must say, Fnatic was already further than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was already 10 years old. So it was an early business, meaning say there were a few contracted employees and obviously players were contracted as so, but it was still early days that it did not run on volunteering and free time and things like this. And it had its first sponsors already.
So it was a running business, essentially.
It was a running business. And but from a business perspective, it was still early. From a name perspective, it was already like 10 years old.
So the brand was there, just not the company behind it, essentially.
So obviously credits go to Sam Matthews, his mom, Patrick, etc. Saad, who already there. But I would still like to say that I took Fnatic in a way that as a business it could grow really well. I think commercially put quite a lot of effort because we know it is tough to make a viable business out of running a team. So I guess that is a big achievement that Fnatic remained relevant, grew as a business. And part of that, you just need to manage that on the back end, right? Because also it becomes chaos and things like this.
I can imagine, yeah.
So I think I've been part of quite an important stage of Fnatic. And so I think the biggest challenge at times has been, it almost sounds like a luxury problem, but Fnatic was a very big name in a small industry. So I could not always pitch this big sponsorship or things like this because people did not see the size of the whole market or could not see how Fnatic was actually indeed 5 times bigger than our next competitor in the league. But they go like, oh, you're in the same league. Why would I pay, 5 times more than the other one? So I guess that is the issue of like, like how big you are in the big picture of things.
Well, and it's really people not understanding esports as well as you'd hope them to, almost, right? When you're pitching a plan, it's kind of the not understanding part that probably doesn't help with that either.
No, exactly, and certain things I only realized later as well. Is people have different perceptions about what esports is, and with Fnatic we're always at the very top of the competition. But people speak about if you and I just play a game against each other, that's esports as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I like more the name competitive gaming because I think that is just the whole spectrum from you and I playing a game against each other. Versus
to Katowice, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, time at Fnatic, how did that come to an end and how did Excel start, essentially?
Yeah. Good friends with Fnatic. It did well. And launched also the peripheral business, Fnatic gear with that, but Sam Matthews had a big hand in that, and he was obviously there as well. So I think the great thing, the way I look at it with Fnatic at that time was, Sam is a great visionary, he's a creative. Patrick, he did everything on the competitor side, so all credits to him. Karn, indeed, so for me it was good to focus on, let's call it, the business side, and to be honest, you'll hear me talking a lot about these kind of things.
No, exactly. That's your expertise, right? That's what you're there for, essentially.
Yes, and I think at some stage, had some conversations with Sam, and it was good for him to come back full time as a CEO. Which he was when he started, and I think this was maybe the way I look at it. Also, the time where I said like, okay, this is how maybe he envisioned it already. At that time, 15 years ago, how big things would be at that time, and it just starts to get really interesting. So we got a proper business. The foundations are good. The name is obviously very good, and I was like, okay, actually, I'm not the founder, and so I call it always the presidential term. It's 4 years, about 4 years and a bit. It's like, and then I was like, okay, maybe it's just good to move on. And Excel wasn't there yet for me. Excel was already there. Excel started essentially when I joined Fnatic, so the end of 2014.
Okay.
And that was started by two brothers, Joel and Kieran Holmes Darby, which is also no name. It was, so I left Fnatic April 2019.
Okay.
It was...
was that before or after the logo rebrand? Was before the rebrand, wasn't it? When they changed the logo from the old
Excel.
one. No, for Fnatic.
Oh, okay.
the old logo to the new logo. That was
it went
2020,
through a few
wasn't it?
iterations. You need to tell me which one it was.
Oh, so are you to blame, or is it?
No. First of all, if you want to talk about branding and rebranding, we can talk about it as well. I wasn't part of the last one where it's the really simplified version.
Yeah.
But I was part of the one where it went from the more complicated logo to more softer and already a bit simplified version. But yeah, it's the not the very last one.
Not the one we have now, essentially. Okay.
Yeah. But
just curious, because that's I think I remember when I've been a Fnatic fan essentially ever since I've gone into esports. So I remember that sparked some debate into the community. So I was just came up. I was wondering if you were part of that, but that was after your time then. Okay. Because Excel had a rebrand as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I will talk about it when we go through the Excel esports journey. And but I didn't know Excel esports at that time that well. I first actually knew about them when they became a founding partner of the LEC.
Right. Yeah.
Which with Fnatic obviously we were as well, and so that was still my time with Fnatic. And then I did a bit some in-between work in between Fnatic and Excel Esports. So we're talking April to sort of October 2019. And actually that's when I first set up MC3.gg. And then I kind of parked that for a moment because I was approached to join Excel Esports. And Excel Esports had then joined the LEC.
Which was quite impressive for them, right? That was really impressive as a small esports org joining the biggest league for people who don't know what LEC is, it's League of Legends European Championship. So the biggest League of Legends competition in Europe, right?
Yeah.
And Excel was a small startup esports org, really. So that was big at the time. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely big. And, all credits here again to Joel and Kieran. But at that time, so we're talking about summer 2019, the ownership, and I think the businesses are realized it's quite a big deal. Just the LEC alone. So we spoke about that when I did my sort of presentation here about my 5 Ps. But you go from passion to profession, right? There's so many obligations certainly that come up. There's a lot of expectations, and this is the first time we also go like, we need to seriously see how to grow this as a business rather than just winning titles. So I think that's sort of how they got to me. And he was like, okay, it's called a free agent. I was a free agent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. free agent CEO looking for work. Exactly.
Exactly. And so I had a few conversations, and then I started to sort of do some work at the end of 2019, and then became official in January 2020. And I was like, I didn't set out to again be part of an esports team. And then I was like, you know what, like with all that experience that I built up and the knowledge that I have right now, it's like, yeah, it'd be really cool to do that again. But not only that, again, I was thinking, I see a new opportunity, and it's not necessarily just doing again what I'd done with Fnatic.
But it's very smaller scale, right? Almost.
Yeah, but here's where I thought like where Excel Esports was really good, because funnily enough, whilst Fnatic, bigger name in a way, definitely at that time than Excel Esports, everyone would recognize Excel Esports as more like the prominent UK esports team already at that time.
Yeah.
And particularly also joining the LEC.
Hmm.
And I had obviously also seen with Fnatic that not many people actually knew that Fnatic had their HQ
in London. Yeah, right.
It's either Swedish because of Counter-Strike, or maybe it's Germany, Berlin because of League of Legends, and so. And the Dota team is in Southeast Asia, and so it's quite global. And there was a lot happening in London, but there was no real competition or teams, based in London or UK. Obviously, that changed a bit later with the HQ and the bunker that we set up there.
Yeah.
But no matter what, Excel Esports was regarded as
the UK org.
The UK org.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'll talk again a bit about the business side of things here, but what I experienced with Fnatic at that time, talking about the industry, that's why I say about big name but small industry. When we were pitching more to, with commercial partnerships, you're talking to people on the other side who are the brand, marketeers, the marketing people, the sponsorship people, and their budgets are organized in regions or countries. But esports was too small to really tap into global big sponsorship budgets like maybe Formula 1 is and football is. So you'd be more dealing with regional managers. But the regional managers and their budgets were at that time actually too small for us, So we had a global audience and, people everywhere. The commonality was like they're gamers and esports fans, so obviously that works well for what we call the endemic ones. We want to, it's about the keyboards, the chairs, and the hardware, and so. But it didn't work that well yet for the non-endemic, and then you go more to FMCG, and consumer brands, not necessarily gaming. Obviously, we saw a great opportunity because a gamer is a person like anyone else, right? So. Yeah. It's not only about gaming products, but I was at that time with Excel Esports. It's like the industry and the people on the sponsorship and marketing side has evolved. It's bigger budgets, etc. And
because esports was more recognized at the time as well.
More recognized. Exactly. Marketing agencies, branding agencies were a lot more interested in what was happening on the esports side. They build up their own expertise. So with that came also bigger budgets. And that meant, and that's with Excel Esports, I would say it had been really successful as like a success point for Excel Esports. It started off with BT, but EE is a sponsor, HSBC is a sponsor, JD Sports is a sponsor, big names. And that more from there's obviously an international scope, but there's still more regional budget. So the timing was also right to say like, we're not only going to be the UK team, and we'll talk about the branding because I wanted to position it as a British brand.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was all part of it. But it was also actually the right time to really position for more regional things and actually still tap into really interesting sponsors and so, which at that time with Fnatic, it wasn't there yet.
Right. And this was also at the beginning of the pandemic, I imagine, right? The time we go into Excel. What was that like? Did that have a big impact?
Oh my God. We have to talk about it again.
If you want to. I mean.
No, I'm joking.
For esports, it was a big time, right?
Yeah.
Big time period.
I think what I noticed then, like the first thing we needed to tell people is like esports is impacted by the pandemic and COVID as much as any other entertainment vertical, right? Esports is still, I'd say, a lot of that is still happening in the stadia, right? But the view was like, oh, it's gaming, so the business is booming, right? And I think very quickly people in the industry is like, no, actually it's not really working like this. Yes, viewership has gone up. But I think what happened is that this was a great time for content creators, right? Because the way I look at it is watching the LEC as an example that used to be played and now again in a really nice studio in Berlin.
And it went online,
was played from the bedrooms again. And it went online. And it wasn't really the bedroom, it was...
Offices.
Yeah. But that doesn't look exciting. And in fact, you don't see the difference anymore between a really entertaining and cool streamer versus, the pros playing the game.
I remember G2 winning one of the splits, and they just had their trophy in their office, and it's not the same as seeing it with all the lights and the sparkles and everything in the studio, right? It was a bit because I kind of got into esports 2019, 2018-ish, and seeing the difference going from I went to Spring Split Finals, Rotterdam, LEC in Ahoy, to going online it's not the same, is it? It's really not the same. Yeah, exactly.
So esports or competitive gaming at its top needs live, action in the stadia, and again, from a business perspective, all I wanted actually with Fnatic and Excel Esports, and so obviously from a competitive perspective, we want to hold a trophy. But I say my minimum requirement is that we qualify to be on stage. I just wanted to be, and I called it, in the visible spectrum. And I think that's where people start to recognize you. That's where you get that closeness to the talent, and you're actually in an environment where it's so exciting. You mentioned I am Katowice again. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and the show is so amazing. And that's what esports is about, right? And that's the dream. And I think, I kind of thought of it, not the football expert, but it's the same as if you watch your neighborhood football team, watching on playing on a neighborhood pitch, and then you still play on a neighborhood pitch and you get maybe the pros on it, or you see them playing a match on a training field, but it's just not as exciting as in a big stadium, with all the people around it.
Yeah.
And so if I think back of it, it's been really a challenge. However, I would say what was relatively good for Excel Esports, we were still in the building phase, right? Like, I was also like, success can come too early. And what I mean to say with that is, if you win titles and trophies, you want to make sure that everything else is in place to use that word, capitalize on the moment. And that means that you got to have a great brand, you got to have great content, you got to have great partners, you got to be able to do activations, and let's call it like your web shop and your web things, and with your sponsors and so. If success comes too early and you can't capitalize on the moment, then what happens actually is everyone wants your players.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you got nothing really to say for them to be proud of, and to give them something, obviously not only salary, but be part of really a great
something
brand
to
and a great
represent,
team.
essentially. Yeah, exactly.
So I was kind of like, look, guys, obviously you want to win a trophy, but I don't want to go like all out this year. I just want to build on foundations, and I want to build on our name. And bit by bit, we got access to better players and things like this, and players want to stay. And, I would say, if you ask like what one of the, talking about a big achievement, but things not accomplished is actually we still need to get like a major title with
actually win
Esports.
something, yeah.
But I like to think like, you want to create obviously that lot of hope, a lot of aspiration, and that's part of what you want to give the fans, aside with the titles. So yes, that's been a bummer, particularly when we got reverse swept against Fnatic in the LEC. That was obviously, sort of a personal thing where you go like, oh my God, like we're playing against,
exactly, your old employer, yeah. So would you say that rebranding the logo and the whole rebrand for Excel had a big part in that?
Yeah, so I know people, and I do understand that, a bit wary about new name, new brand or so. And the first thing, when I started with Excel Esports, it was first sort of getting a few operations, back on its feet and things like this. And then, and you talk about, COVID, but it was pretty much after a few months, like March 2020, I think, here, when they started to lock things up. And I said, well, I locked myself up during lockdown to just really work on strategy. And that's also a little bit where my 5 Ps were born, actually.
Okay.
So reflecting on my time.
They were made at Excel, essentially. Oh, that's interesting.
in this like little bedroom locked up, and I'm just sort of romanticizing the whole thing. But I did think like, look, I don't yet have like with Fnatic a big history to provide to sponsors and players and fans, and so there is
same
obviously a
legacy.
history. Yeah, legacy there, and to be very clear with all respect, there was already a good achievements with Excel, but we're now talking at another level, right? So I actually need to work on a vision and a dream and a story, and that's where that's
how the rebrand started.
What a brand is.
Okay, yeah.
And I was also saying I don't want to call it a rebrand, because we're not gonna take out what was already there. We're gonna actually build the next stage of our journey, the Excel journey, and for that we need a new brand platform that speaks more. Now, the things that I wanted to achieve is I wanted to sort of make a little bit of a break of the very sports-like thinking. Esports and gaming is more than, just, it's a lot of it, but growing athletes and being part of a league. It's about, I was like, it's first about a brand, and secondly, it's about where we compete. And it makes sense in a way because, whilst League of Legends has been there for a while and Counter-Strike, other game titles are not always there.
Well, exactly, yeah.
So different with football, I don't want to do or die with the popularity of the game. What needs to stay is actually the brand. And then two is like, just want to adapt more to digital culture, if you will, to more like the broader gaming thing. And what I just mentioned, I was also part of like how we actually become a UK team to a British brand, because I want to have more international appeal, whilst preserving what is a big part of Excel Esports is being based here and being British.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is where Kieran and Joel, they started it all, right? So that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as you know, I'm not British, so I was obviously like, I'm
Needed
not.
some help with that, yeah.
I'm not part of this, but interestingly, then again, it's like, okay, but I can look at it from, obviously I know the British culture to a fair bit, like living here, but how does an outsider look at it? What are the international people, whether you're from Japan, US, or South America?
Almost the stereotypes, I guess, right?
Yeah. What do they like about British culture? Because you could at times say, and we fall back a little bit to Brexit time or so. It's like, you may not like the politics, but people love British culture, whether it's music, film, etc. And I was like, I want to be that one that does that for gaming, and I don't know yet what it looks like and what it smells like and what it sounds like. So, but that's what we're gonna do. And that was part of, and I called it like brand evolution or so. It's like, it's not a rebrand. We're still Excel Esports. We even debated the name.
Almost.
Yeah,
really? Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, because you know why, Excel and Excel spreadsheets and stuff.
That was part of the fun as well. I remember on Twitter, like beating, like the memes everyone makes about beating Excel. Right?
And of course we thought about this, but I was like, people already know us by our name, and obviously I had seen other examples with MetLines and Splice, I suppose, where it just never really landed. And I was also like, but there are other Excels out there, and in particular Excel, there's quite a lot of other Excels out there. But in the world of esports, people know who we are as Excel, and that is what counts. So, there's obviously now merged with Giants, still Giants Excel. We did think about how we could be more adapt to digital culture. So that's why we changed our colors. I'll talk about that as well. We changed the logo. Because, the logo so often only comes across as a very tiny sort of, icon or
small
avatar.
PNG almost. Yeah, exactly.
And then sometimes you have all these complicated logos, and then you don't know anymore what it is. And so we thought quite carefully about the logo and the XML and how it would be used in different instances. We thought about maybe just naming ourselves really the XNL, but that's too generic with extra large. We went through all these things.
Must be someone in the office being like, oh, I've got a great idea. And then someone's like, no, it doesn't work because it's XL, it's extra large. Like that kind of moments must have happened so much.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a difficult name to work with, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's a bit balancing. And before we even really landed on that XNL on the logo, I named the project actually because I had in my strategy named a few projects, and I called it From Excel to Excel, as in from EXEL to Excel. I didn't think it would be the logo, but I thought like this just indicates how we go from from here to big,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe the next project will be XXL or so. But
Yeah,
it's,
exactly. Yeah.
it's Giant XL now. So in a way, it is
Oh,
there.
that
Giant
works
XL.
actually. That works. Yeah, that works.
Oh my god! Yeah, I didn't think of that yet. So, but there you go.
You set all of that emotion, obviously, going from XL to XL to Giant XL. Exactly. Oh wow, yeah.
So that's on the branding, but I do think that there's a lot that can go wrong. There's not that much that can go right. I think we got a lot of at least not negative, not that much negative.
Mm-hmm.
We got neutral to good feedback to it for the way we not only changed our identity, but there's the story behind it. And how we addressed everything.
So looking back, would you say it was a successful upgrade?
I think so, yeah. But it's also, call it a rebrand or whatever, is we're in a very dynamic industry.
Yeah.
Keeping your own identity for the next, 10, 20 years doesn't make sense to me either. And so you got to be, bold at times. And people obviously become a fan at a time when things were like that and it looked like that. So it's a balancing act. But standing still is not an option.
Exactly.
You need on your brand.
Yeah. Okay, so how did your time at XL come to an end? And now looking at today, you've moved on to MC3.gg.
Yep.
So tell us a bit about that as well.
Well, I call it almost another presidential term. So I think, XL Esports was as a pivotal moment in a way where, it's how do you grow from here? So at some stage, I was at a moment where it's I created from XL, I built XL Esports as I would still call it as a classic esports team, right? So we do quite a bit what others are also doing. So it's in a good position, and there's still a lot that needs to happen. Winning a title and so. But what I meant is when I said that capitalizing on its success in its moment, I think everything was in place. It's an amazing team behind the scenes. It's an amazing teams on the stage. The brand is good, the partners are good, the content is good, etc. And obviously it needs to grow. And there's still a lot of work going into that. But then the question is, what's next, right? And then people talk as well. It's okay, what makes teams profitable and so. So worked on that and paid on that, and parts of that are now being continued. So as one example, it's also a bit more game educational content, which is now XL League Plus. So that also goes more into sort of from broader competitive gaming to narrow esports, if you will. And there's a lot of people out there as well who do a lot of competitive gaming, but may not know everything on the top competition. But yeah, I was sort of nearing another sort of presidential term. So also there I had a few conversations, and then I was also Wouter, you need to give yourself a little kick under the butt, so to speak. And because you've now doing this for 8 years across Fnatic and XL Esports, and I already had over the years a little bit of time, as I mentioned, in between XL and Fnatic, I actually set up MC3.gg for the sole reason that I was doing some contract work. But I had some little idea with the name. And so MC3 means something. What I had at my time at Fnatic and then later or so of XL Esports is that people approach me either for advisory or so. It could be a small investment. And so, and I thought of it then, and then later as well, I put a lot of my time investment in the team business in the world of esports and bigger world of gaming. And then bit by bit, it was okay, my money and other wisdom, maybe investment goes into these businesses that actually work on other parts in the ecosystem. I'll talk a bit about that, but it's more on the infrastructure side. So. But MC3, basically, I got to that name. It sounds maybe not a bit meaningless, but it means it comes from two things. It's a little play on MC square.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. That's what I thought it was.
So MC square, that's Einstein, and it's basically the energy mass equation. So is how energy can turn into mass and mass into energy. And that's how I thought about actually when I said from bedroom to boardroom
Mhm.
or from 1 to 10. And so it's like there's a lot of passionate entrepreneurial energy.
Mhm.
But I think what I've done as an achievement, to this one is I created impactful business matter from
Mhm.
that. And that's actually my tagline. It's a website as well, and it says create impactful matter
Mhm.
from passionate energy, and that's essentially our matter and energy is
Mhm.
the equation. The other thing is just simple. It's an M and 3 C's: management, creation,
Okay.
commercial,
So
and capital.
you won't have to upgrade this brand anytime soon because you clearly really thought about it over this
Yeah,
one, yeah.
yeah. But look, also here it's interesting. You say
Mhm.
I do feel like I'm just starting from scratch
Mhm.
again. It's still a developing idea. I call it a venture studio
Mhm.
because there's different things that I've grouped into that were from the past and
Mhm.
also current. So quite active at the moment with
Mhm.
skybox.gg as one example.
So
Um,
what's your goal for MC3?
right now, I'm a curious guy. I just
Uh-huh.
wanna, what I mean to say with that, like, I want to focus very much on the infrastructure side
Mhm.
of the esports and competitive gaming ecosystem.
Mhm.
I'll explain a little bit more what I mean with that. Um, I also just want to learn things, so I learn from this as well, and free, and maybe most importantly, in a very meaningful way, help quite early stage business
Mhm. Mhm.
in through their first stages of life, and sometimes it's still based on an idea. Obviously, they're
Mhm.
working on a product or something.
Almost Shark Tank like, where they come up to you, they pitch their product, and you help them further. Is that?
Yeah, but right, it's not pitching. It's people I know, and we've
Mhm.
spoken in the
Mhm.
past and ideas, and it's a lot about
Because your network is probably massive, right? With your years in esports,
yeah,
so it's
uh,
that is that where it mostly comes from? Your
yes,
okay,
uh,
okay,
uh,
interesting. So you'd say it's something. Is that going to be your main focus over the next couple of years, or is that
yeah. That's how I look at it now.
okay?
But if
You
someone
never
comes
know.
up, oh my god, is this amazing business? Do you want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
join?
yeah,
And I'll
exactly.
think
Yeah.
about it. So don't pin me down on
Uh
this.
huh.
You said
Won't
this.
quote it. Yeah.
But this is what I'm working on, and
Mhm.
again, like I spent quite a lot of time with Skybox, which I love doing, and Skybox is a good example because they're at the core of it is data. They're in the world of
Mhm.
Counter Strike, and they build applications which is basically about team performance. It's
Mhm.
also a solution for broadcast, and we're now also going more into fan
Mhm.
experiences. Yeah, that's a good example. But on the back of this is MC3 for
Mhm.
me the meta, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, so committed to that. And for me, it's also just making sure that I just continue enjoy what I'm doing. Really,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
I hope to create my own path in this. And
So on that note, would you say after 9-ish years in esports, is that still something you're passionate about? Still something you feel that same love for the moment you stepped into
yeah,
the Olympic Stadium? Or sorry, the what was it? The stadium in Wembley?
yeah,
Is it nothing's changed since then?
no,
No? Okay, well that's
no,
good, right? That's really important, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
So more recently, just moving on to like general esports topics, right? What's come up is the talk about Esports Winter almost,
yeah,
or the more um almost the plateauing of the esports industry, they
yeah,
call it, right? It boomed, plateau, maybe down a bit. Well, what are
yeah.
your thoughts on that? What's your opinions? Do you agree with what people generally say?
Yeah, generally, and maybe this even relates a little bit to career advice.
Mm-hmm.
The winter has happened in many places,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not just in esports. And what I mean to say with that, I would always recommend, if your passion is to work in esports, it's always great to have some contacts and references or even work experience in other industries
Mm-hmm.
because you'll see that at times things are not that different as somewhere else. You need to understand the difference. You need to know where it's unique, and sometimes you need to know where the same principle
Mm-hmm.
applies. For esports specific, so yes, impacted as well. But I'd like to think of it as well. It's hopefully a pivotal moment. We'll now
Mm-hmm.
coming back to it again, where we start to talk less about sports like thinking in competitive gaming and more just competitive gaming. And that's also why I'm more focused on now on the infrastructure and the tech and the data side. And I'll give you a few examples. You know, in that was also earlier days, Fnatic. You know, you work on broadcasts and so on. People would like to know the value of a broadcast, particularly when there's sponsors and there's media value. In early days, because with Fnatic, I knew I was delivering more value than others. I was looking for those parties who could prove that for me, to measure the media value. And that was really early days, if at all people were at times doing. We were posting a lot of like, oh, we have this many, or reporting how many social media followers we had.
Interactions and stuff.
Interactions,
yeah, exactly,
but it was sort of meaningless. Yeah, okay, but what's the value to that, right? So I had reached out was then Rapicom, and Rapicom became Nielsen as one of those parties, but they were all over sports. And I say like, yeah, we can do that, but it costs you this amount of money. And they had, let's say, old methods for sports content. And by the way, it wouldn't measure really what the value would be, because all that technology is based on players running around in the field. It doesn't happen in gaming, you know? So, and that's early days, but much has been progressed from then. But for me, it's one of those examples, and there are many of them, where I say like the sports analogy doesn't work. What we have in common is that we compete, and we compete in leagues and in tournaments or so, but that's almost where it stops, you know? And
because you think that people in esports are trying to compare themselves to sports too much, and essentially copy sports almost, right? It's the discussion of going into the Olympics as esports is something you would then.
I was going to bring this up.
Here we go.
I was pretty much always, I would say, I don't need to be on the Olympics. I agree. Olympics is for sports. And if sports people say we don't need esports, I go like, yeah, I agree with you, because we will over time have our own Olympics, whatever it is. And, you know, there's obviously now a lot happening on the Esports World Cup. And I would say it's not necessarily there, but with all the things and so, but you start to see how that becomes really a World Cup in its own right, but really for gaming, you know, as one example. And the people who work on it now, as we know, like, you know, there's Ralf Reigert, who had his many years with ESL as a CEO. So it's not just quickly coming in and, oh, I've done this in sports and this is now, it's been building up over years. And I'm very curious to see what it would be. And I hope that we will say, yeah, indeed, we don't need to be in the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. So when do you think that will happen? What, in your vision, what does the future of esports look like the next 5-10 years?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I think we will never say or see like, oh, that was then. You know, there's a few moments back in time where you go like, what made up esports?
No pivotal moments, no.
There are some, but you know, it's not like, oh, in 5 years we'll be done. It's just happening, and later we realize, oh my God, we came from there. You know.
So, what would you like to see in 5-10 years?
I mean, I would like to see that. I guess if I keep it to a few points, that we don't say esports anymore and we say competitive gaming.
Do you think that's realistic? Seeing the whole brand that esports built now?
I mean, at least the mindset needs to be different.
Okay,
right? And I think a lot of it is in that word as well, because it continues to keep people, sponsors and others, and you know, to think differently from what it maybe really is. I think too is that you know, I actually do hope. You know, there could maybe be quite a lot of debate about it, where you agree or disagree on, you know, who's running the show and things like this. But I do have hope with the people who are working on Esports World Cup that be quite a template for how you run a great multidisciplinary event, because there are already great events such as obviously Riot Games.
I mean, your Worlds,
Legends.
your Katowice, but it's not the same as you're more talking a sense of you get actual people representing their countries, and one big event where you have CSGO and League and Valorant and Rocket League and then that kind of event, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we can talk about why I think that's important, but I will get quite detailed. And I think, I do hope that the economy of leagues and tournaments will work itself out. So that will have to go with the publishers and their interest into making those viable ecosystems. And again, hence, I do think that esports World Cup might play a good role into this as well. And, with how they try to support teams in multiple disciplinary events. But I think the other thing, and I was asked this question already many years ago, where people are asking, okay, what is the next big thing for esports? And VR was quite a thing then, and so as a technology. So, well, I think we just need to look closer at home. It's like the leagues are very important to create a stable, commercially viable environment and the integrity of the competition, all these aspects. So that is obviously what we have in common with sports. And then I was also, mobile as a platform, like it's at times still feels very different and it's hard to see. But I think
it's not as recognized in the Western world as it is in Asia, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, PC has obviously been an amazing platform for esports, and I guess mobile would be one way or the other as well, which, as you say, it's another part of the world it is already. So what would it look like? 5 years is not that far away from now.
Exactly, yeah.
I spent 8 years in esports already. And if I look back at it, what has changed is obviously the quality of the whole production and the show. So I hope that will find its own further path and identity and how we make up a great show. I think too is what's essentially already there, how and where we watch esports and the leagues and things like this, and that it also finds its own balance in how it becomes a viable exercise. And I don't know. I think the rest will just see. And as I said, like it's we know that certain things shaped esports as PCs and online gaming and but I was as another point, like I was always surprised that years ago Riot never really got a big award for their League of Legends competition, and then Overwatch game and Overwatch League, and won awards and stuff. It's like, well, I don't know why is LEC not really mentioned here? So
Overwatch
or the other
as
competition.
good as the league, is it? No.
But the thing is they didn't come out with a bang. They just build every year progressively, and then you might not notice it just from one day on the other, but then suddenly you realize, my God, these guys really
they're quite good, aren't they?
Yeah.
So right now, of course, we're at College of Esports, and it's pretty sure it's the first actual university institution based on esports, or at least through the lens of esports. Do you think esports and education is something we could look forward to in the future?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And we had a few conversations about this, and the approach that I like, maybe it could be a bit old school, but I do believe like you got to learn a core skill, and a core skill means like you can apply it in different things. But I think what's great about it is you can apply it to a passion of you. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
So if you apply the skill later in another, call it entertainment vertical, so whether it be music or sports or gaming, then you go like, that's why I say it's like, okay, I know the differences, but in essence, it's still somewhat the same. In fact, you might learn certain things here that are not yet that progressed in other areas. So maybe how you build a virtual studio and so broadcast, and how you do remote production and things like this. But
so you'd say the way we do it here, where you have your main course, so events management, but through the lens of esports, in the end, it's still an events management, a business degree, right? Which you can transfer to different areas. That is the way to integrate esports into education.
And again, like I think here it's so well set up, and you got to be passionate about what you're doing as one part. You need to be very knowledgeable about what you're doing. You need to learn how to face challenges and how you deal with them. These things. but to apply that to something you really love enhances the learning experience so massively.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know you, and I know you spend way more time in it than maybe
I'd like to admit even. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and I guess that's just because you love what you're doing. And learning is, I guess, for one part is reading it and understanding it, and the other part is experiencing it and then to reflect
applying
on
it
again.
as well, right? Yeah. Okay, so would you, how would you, the people watching, going to be uni students at College of Esports and general people interested in making a career in esports, how does one go along? How do you do that?
I think first of all is to then understand the industry at least in its sort of basic form. This is where he said, like, the 5 Ps that I have, and eventually can be applied to so many things. But the first 2 is passion, professionalism, and then it goes to power, brand, and purpose. And I called the 5th P eventually profit. And when I did my presentation here a few months ago, I was like, oh, this could actually even apply to your own career journey, right? And profit is a broader word of meaning. That's where you sort of reap the rewards and, you build on a career, you invest in it. But first it starts obviously with passion, what you're passionate about. But the step to profession and professionalism is quite a big one. Because that's, again, where you get the obligations, you need to...
Where you actually go into the job, right? It's going from bedroom to boardroom.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where I'd say you need to know who plays in the industry and what's happening. And so...
and how would you recommend people to do that?
Well, that's a very good question. But, no, I think speak to people. I think there's obviously always
building that network
a bit of
is
reading,
important, right?
A bit of reading to do, and maybe you just go on LinkedIn. I do that at times myself. I go from one person to the other person, and so because you know how one person links to another and to another, and I kind of understand a bit what they're doing, and so because I encounter at times a new thing or a new industry where I don't really know how it works. I think then too is try to get some practical experience as soon as you can, and free is indeed like maybe visit College of Esports and talk to you, Finnlo. Say like, right, how does it work here? What do you learn? And like that. So I guess like for me there was no esports education when I started. And so, I mean, that's good news to everyone. So you can in a way always, follow your passion. But I guess that's how today I would start that, find out how it just works, and dare to see, okay, this is my passion, and here's where my passion can be applied in that part of the industry.
So you've been CEO for 2 of the biggest esports orgs in the UK, definitely, if not the world. What do you look for when you employ people? So if someone were to come up to you, hey, I've studied College of Esports for 3 years and I now want a job at, let's say, Excel, right? What is it you're looking for in their CV, in their portfolio, maybe even in an interview?
Yeah. I think a lot is down to character, because you become part of a team, and you can be really good at things, but if the team doesn't gel or so, if things will get very difficult. So there's a lot into character.
That is the general advice of. I've talked to a decent amount of people in esports now, and it's just the advice of just be nice, I guess, right? Just be a good person helps a lot to making your way into the industry, I guess.
Yeah, and this is maybe also one thing that you learn when you go in your education, and maybe when you're here at the College of Esports, you suddenly work with people that you not necessarily chose as your friends. You may become friends, but you've got to find a way how to do this together, right? And you find that some people are better things than other things, and so character, how you come across, how you communicate, and so I think that's very critical. 2, there's obviously the element of experience. Have you done more than like you, Finnlo? Like you say, not more than you, but it's like I did more than what was just expected from me. So that speaks a bit like to the passion. The ideas are very important. And if there's a way, obviously understanding your education journey. But I think very importantly is your, as I said, like your ideas, and then you can actually explain your ideas. So you just not have a creative idea, but you can explain and argument your ideas why you think it's good and how you would do it.
So would that be like proving your worth to the company you're joining, essentially?
Yeah. Is it like, okay, how would you contribute to what we're doing? And I guess the other part is showing an interest in what we're doing and understanding sort of the mission we're on. So and obviously, I mean, it's almost like as a given, you want someone who's skilled in the job. There's always learning on the job. But yeah, being skilled in a job, that's why you hire someone for very much as well, so they can do that part, and you don't need to worry about it anymore.
So would you say that esports, the same way, you must have heard this, like Apple and Microsoft have these questions Apple asks in their job interviews. Does esports have tips like that? Would you say that there's like the one question that always gets asked, and that's something you can prepare for, or does that not really exist?
No, I guess not. But again, I just really want to make sure that people understand that, you're going to be part of something that's really exciting, but you're here in the end to do a job. And maybe there's then the other thing is like, I just want to make sure that people don't get caught up in the ups and downs and the drama that you have and the players and stuff. And it's a really fun industry. But you should not want to join because you want to be close to the action or the players or things like this on the esports team, because then you get caught up in the drama, and then that's not good profession.
Okay, so stick to what you do essentially, and don't reach outside of your boundaries.
See, it's having that helicopter view in a way. It's like you take yourself a little bit out of the equation of which is still your passion. But I quite early on was like, I'm not going to read Reddit every day because it's going to change my mood, and but it's not going to change the needle either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so let's say you were to give 5 short tips on how to get into esports. What 5 tips would you give?
I think one, do you try to find out soon what you want, which can always change. But it's good because I have that as well. It changes for me all the time. But I am sort of focused on where I want to go next as a step.
Have a goal in mind, essentially.
Yeah. 2 is, indeed do network, do speak to people. And I don't know if that's always the best. I say that with a bit of caution. As in like, do at times volunteer and so, because I say that as a caution also as an employer CEO, I did not want to just rely on volunteers or people who are passionate about something. You always need to make sure that you give back and you pay and so for the work that people do. But it helped for me becoming the CEO of Fnatic. And I think, as an employer, like it is so nice to see that sometimes people take the first step with this. And I think if I look back on it, these are absolutely people that I have in high regard. And I always try to return a favor because I know that they did the first step. And certain part is like, it's obviously hard work. When I say be patient, it's not like, okay, you need wait and sit, but certain things will take time. Don't think that in year 1, you're going to be this or that. But if you show your worth over time, then, it'll
be rewarded.
The 5P, the profit, will absolutely be there. But it's the 5P. So you go from your passion to professionalism. You build on your own brand, power brand. You have to invest in yourself and, talk about your achievements and things. And the purpose is maybe you find your deeper purpose only later. Like, you're doing a job. Maybe my deeper purpose in the end is MC3 after all these years or so. and maybe profit. We'll see, but that's the fifth P.
Further down the line, yeah, exactly.
So maybe if I just summarize it, try to follow my fifth Ps.
Exactly. Okay. So before we start closing off, is there any final words you'd like to say?
Well, I've said so much.
I feel like we keep talking for hours and hours, but we're on hour and 20 almost.
But let me say this: I've been here a few times. I think it's amazing what you guys are doing, and I know you're also building into something. But it's already an amazing, I guess, like institution and platform to kickstart your career. So this is the one I didn't have, and I think if people are passionate about esports and want to build a career, then they have the fortitude. There is actually a great platform to kickstart your career. It's people can reach out and stuff. I'm sort of always try to help or so here and there if it's a piece of advice, if that's helpful. On that, it's been fun really to be here, and that's what it's all about.
That's always good to hear. That's always good to hear. Yeah. Every week, every podcast we do, we take a selfie. So if you wouldn't mind, we're gonna keep that tradition going. Quick selfie, and we'll get that up in the edit as well. Obviously, get Stanley in there as well. There we go. That will do. Freddie will edit that in there. Thank you, Freddie. And that's all from us this week. Next week we've got the CoEs Couch. I'm not sure who's going to be on it. We'll see. Tune in as always. And Wouter, thank you very, 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 very much for joining. It's been extremely insightful, and I've learned a lot, and I know people at home would have done so as well. Is there anything you want to plug very last minute? Twitter, LinkedIn, anything anyone wants to check out?
No. I'll tell more about my things another time.
That sounds great. We'll get you on.
All for you. So
perfect.
Yeah.
We'll get you on another time. And thank you all for watching. Any comments, any questions, put them in the description. And thank you very much. We'll see you next week.